I stood outside Judge David Lopez's chambers with my phone pressed to my ear, watching Eli sleep in his carrier at my feet while my boss unraveled on the other end of the line. "Hazel, I don't understand why you can't just take a few weeks of leave," Dr. Morrison said, her voice tight with the kind of frustration that came from people who'd never had to choose between a paycheck and a crisis. "The board is asking questions about your availability, and frankly, this adoption situation is becoming a distraction." "The adoption hearing is today, Dr. Morrison." I kept my voice level, professional, even though I'd been awake since 4 a.m. with Eli, and my entire future hung on what happened in the next hour. "I'll be back at the clinic tomorrow. The patients I rescheduled have all been accommodated." "That's not the point. There's a 3-month waiting list for my therapy slots," I said quietly. I reviewed the schedule myself. Every patient I moved was offered an earlier appointment with Dr. Chen or Dr. Patel. No one was abandoned. Silence. Then, "The board expects more flexibility from senior staff." "Of course, I'll have my assistant coordinate with yours." I paused, watching the court clerk glance nervously toward the closed door of the judge's chambers. "But, Dr. Morrison, the research I published last year brought in 2 major grants. My patient retention rate is 94%. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the same consideration you'd give anyone else going through a family emergency." Dr. Morrison hung up without saying goodbye. Welcome back to another story that'll make you question who you can really trust when everything's on the line. What happens in the next 60 seconds will change Hazel's life forever, and the man waiting in that courtroom? He's been watching her longer than she knows. Let's begin. I slipped my phone into my pocket and crouched beside Eli's carrier, adjusting the blanket my sister had crocheted before she died. Before the car accident that had taken her and left me holding a 3-month-old baby I loved more than breathing. 3 months of court dates and social workers. 3 months of wondering if fighting to keep him was selfish. 3 months of being competent at work while falling apart at home. The door to Judge Lopez's chambers opened. My caseworker, Patricia Vega, motioned me forward with the same tight smile she'd worn through every home visit, every document review, every question about whether a single woman with a demanding career could really handle an infant alone. Then I saw him. The man in the tailored charcoal suit walked into family court like gravity bent around him. And judging by the way the bailiff straightened and the clerk's face went pale, maybe it did. Even Patricia shifted, her professional smile faltering as she stepped aside to let him pass. He didn't acknowledge any of them. Just moved through the space with the kind of presence that made people forget how to breathe. Leather beneath the expensive fabric. Ink barely visible at his collar. Eyes that missed nothing. I didn't stand. Didn't reach for Eli's carrier. Just watched him disappear into the judge's chambers and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Ms. Berkman." Patricia's voice was quieter now, careful. "Judge Lopez is ready." I lifted Eli's carrier, my bag strap digging into my shoulder, and walked into the wood-paneled office that smelled like old law books and decisions that changed lives. Judge David Lopez sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. And standing beside him, hands clasped behind his back like he was attending a business negotiation instead of a family court hearing, was the man in the charcoal suit. Up close, he was worse. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair slicked back from a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked almost black in the fluorescent light. Expensive watch. Cufflinks that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The kind of presence that made my pulse kick up even though I didn't want it to. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched me with the kind of focus that made my skin prickle and my throat tighten. "Ms. Berkman," Judge Lopez said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." I set Eli's carrier on the floor between my feet and lowered myself into the chair, every instinct screaming that something had shifted. Patricia hovered near the door. The man didn't move, but I felt the weight of his attention like a hand at the back of my neck. "I've reviewed your petition for adoption," the judge continued, folding his hands atop a manila folder. "Your home study came back exemplary. Your employment is stable. Your references are outstanding." Relief started to uncurl in my chest, then stopped. "However," Judge Lopez said, and the word landed like a gavel, "there's been a development." My hands tightened on the armrests. "A mandatory DNA verification was ordered 3 weeks ago due to sealed hospital records surrounding the child's birth." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Standard procedure when biological lineage needs clarification," the judge said carefully. The man beside him finally spoke. "The results came back this morning." His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to fill a room. And somehow it slid under my skin anyway, making my heart beat faster. I turned to stare at him. "Who are you?" "Donald Berkman." He said it the way someone might say good morning. Courteous, impersonal, final. The room tilted. "That's not possible," I whispered. "My sister never mentioned." "Your sister didn't know," Judge Lopez interrupted gently. He slid a document across his desk. "The DNA results indicate that Eli is biologically connected to the Berkman bloodline, but not through your sister." I didn't reach for the paper. Couldn't. My vision was narrowing, my pulse hammering in my throat. "Then how?" I managed. Donald's eyes, those impossibly dark eyes, flicked to Eli's carrier. For just a second, something raw and quickly buried crossed his face. Grief, maybe, or guilt. "Because," he said quietly, "Eli's biological mother wasn't your sister." The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. "She carried him," I said. "I was there. I went to appointments. I felt him kick." "Your sister carried him," Donald confirmed. "But the child's genetic origins tie him directly to my family, which means someone went to great lengths to hide the truth." Judge Lopez leaned forward. "Ms. Berkman, I understand this is shocking, but the DNA evidence is conclusive, and it raises serious questions about the circumstances surrounding this child's birth, questions that need to be answered before I can finalize this adoption." I looked down at Eli. 3 months old. Perfect. Mine. And now, apparently, the center of a secret someone had been willing to die to protect. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Donald stepped closer to the desk, and I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Hated that the shift in proximity made my breath catch. "It means," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "that your sister's baby is connected to a world you don't understand. And people who should never have known he existed now do." He pulled a card from his jacket pocket and set it on the desk between us. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. "It means you're in danger, Ms. Berkman, and so is he." Judge Lopez cleared his throat. "Given the circumstances, I'm ordering a temporary co-guardianship arrangement until we can verify the child's safety and finalize the adoption. Mr. Berkman has agreed to share legal responsibility." "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. "You can't just—" "I can," the judge said firmly. "And I am. This hearing is adjourned for 2 weeks. In the meantime, you and Mr. Berkman will coordinate on all decisions regarding Eli's care." Donald's gaze never left mine. "I'll be in touch, Ms. Berkman." Then he was gone. The door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded too much like a lock sliding into place. If you're already wondering who Donald Berkman really is and why he knows more about this baby than Hazel does, drop a comment right now. Because the truth, it's so much worse than you think. Following the courtroom confrontation. I walked out of that hearing with Eli in my arms and Donald Berkman's card burning a hole in my pocket. Patricia tried to reassure me. "Co-guardianship arrangements are temporary. Once the court verifies everything, you'll get full custody. But her voice lacked conviction, because we both knew the DNA results had changed everything. I didn't know Donald Berkman. Didn't know why my sister had hidden Eli's true origins. Didn't know what kind of world I'd just been dragged into. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep this child's bloodline a secret. And now that the truth was out, I had a feeling Donald Berkman wasn't the only one watching. The call came 3 days after the hearing. I was in my office at the clinic, reviewing patient notes for my afternoon session, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Berkman? This is Judge Lopez's clerk. The judge would like to see you tomorrow morning at 9. It's regarding Eli's case." My stomach dropped. Is something wrong? "The judge will explain everything tomorrow." She hung up before I could ask more questions. I stared at my phone, dread pooling in my gut. The adoption hearing wasn't supposed to reconvene for 2 weeks. If they were calling me back early, something had changed. And in my experience, emergency court summons never meant good news. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early, Eli strapped to my chest in the carrier because daycare didn't open until 8. Patricia met me outside the judge's chambers, her expression carefully neutral. "What's going on?" I asked. "The judge will explain." That phrase again, like everyone had been coached to say as little as possible. The door opened, and we were ushered inside. Judge Lopez sat behind his desk, looking older than he had 3 days ago, tired. And standing by the window, as if he'd been there all morning, was Donald Berkman. He turned when I entered, those dark eyes tracking my movement with unsettling focus. "Ms. Berkman," the judge began without preamble, "thank you for coming on short notice." I settled into the chair, adjusting Eli's weight. "Your clerk said this was urgent." "It is." He opened a folder on his desk. 3 weeks ago, before your initial hearing, I received a sealed request from the state's attorney's office regarding Eli's birth records. My pulse quickened. "What kind of request?" "The hospital records from your sister's delivery were flagged in a federal database. Certain details had been redacted. Names, medical staff, even the attending physician's signature was blacked out." I blinked. "That doesn't make sense. I was there. I signed the release forms when they took her body." My voice cracked. Judge Lopez's expression softened. "I'm not questioning what you experienced, Ms. Berkman. But legally, when records are sealed at this level, it indicates something beyond standard medical privacy. It suggests protection." "Protection from what?" Donald's voice cut through the room. "From people asking questions." I turned to glare at him. "You seem to know a lot about this." "I know enough." Judge Lopez cleared his throat. "Given the irregularities, I ordered a DNA test to confirm biological lineage before finalizing the adoption. It's standard procedure when records are compromised." "But you already did a DNA test," I said. 3 weeks ago. That's how you found out about—" I gestured vaguely at Donald. "That test was preliminary," the judge said carefully. "Ordered by Mr. Berkman's legal team as part of the co-guardianship arrangement. This one is court-mandated, more comprehensive." Something cold slithered down my spine. "What are you looking for?" The judge and Donald exchanged a glance. It was brief, but loaded with meaning I couldn't decode. "The truth," Judge Lopez said finally, "about who Eli really is." I left the courthouse with more questions than answers and a growing sense that everyone knew something I didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd had with my sister during her pregnancy. She'd been secretive, yes, anxious in ways I'd attributed to first-time mother nerves. But there had been moments, small, strange moments I'd dismissed at the time, like when I'd asked her about Eli's father and she'd gone pale. "It's complicated, Hazel." "Complicated how?" Is he married? Dangerous? Just let it go, please. Or the time I'd tried to accompany her to a prenatal appointment, and she'd insisted on going alone. I need to do this by myself, she'd said, her hand protective over her belly. It's important. And then there was the night, 2 weeks before she died, when she'd shown up at my apartment at midnight, crying. If something happens to me, she'd whispered, clutching my hands, promise me you'll take care of him. Promise me you won't let anyone take him. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me, Hazel. I'd promised. And 3 days later, she was gone. My phone buzzed, pulling me from the memory. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me swipe to accept. Ms. Berkman. Donald's voice, low and controlled even at midnight. We need to talk. It's the middle of the night. The DNA results came back. My breath caught. Already? Judge Lopez said it would take... I expedited them. Of course he did. And? My voice was barely a whisper. A pause. Long enough that my heart started hammering. You need to see these in person. I'm sending a car. Now? Now. Donald, just tell me. Not over the phone. His tone shifted, something almost gentle underneath the command. Trust me, Hazel. You'll want to be sitting down when you see this. The line went dead. 10 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside my building, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that whatever was in those DNA results was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my sister, about Eli, about the life I'd been trying so desperately to build. The driver opened the door. I got in. The car drove through Chicago's empty streets in silence. I sat in the back seat with my arms wrapped around myself, watching streetlights blur past, trying to prepare for whatever truth was waiting at the end of this ride. But nothing could have prepared me. The sedan pulled up to a building in the Gold Coast, sleek, modern, the kind of place where security cameras tracked your every move before you even reached the door. Donald was waiting in the lobby. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, that carefully controlled expression showing cracks around the edges. Come with me, he said, already moving toward a private elevator. We rode up in silence. 32 floors. The doors opened into a penthouse office that was all glass and steel and dark wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A desk that probably cost more than my car. And on that desk, a manila envelope. Donald gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I stayed standing. Just tell me. He stared at me for a long moment. Something that looked like regret flickering in those dark eyes. Then he opened the envelope and slid a document across the desk. Official letterhead, State of Illinois, DNA analysis report. I forced myself to read. The technical language blurred together. Genetic markers, probability percentages, exclusion rates. But 3 lines stood out with brutal clarity. Subject, Eli James Berkman. Maternal. Match, 0% probability. Paternal. Lineage, Berkman bloodline confirmed. The room tilted. That's not possible, I whispered. My sister carried him. I was there. I saw... You saw a woman pregnant with a child, Donald said quietly. But that doesn't mean the child was genetically hers. I looked up, my vision swimming. What are you saying? He pulled out another document. Older. Edges yellowed with age. A birth certificate from 28 years ago. The mother's name was blacked out, but the father's name was clear. Marcus Berkman. Donald's finger tapped the name. My father. He had a daughter before I was born. A girl he kept hidden from everyone, including me. My breath came shorter. I don't understand what this has to do with... The DNA test proves Eli isn't your sister's biological child. Donald's voice was flat, clinical, like he was reading a contract. But it also proves he carries Berkman blood, which means only one thing. He looked at me, and I saw it now. The grief he'd been holding back. Eli is my half-sister's child. The sister I never knew existed until 3 days ago when I saw these results. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. But my sister, she was pregnant. I went to appointments with her. I felt the baby kick. Your sister carried him, Donald confirmed. But she wasn't his biological mother, someone else was. He slid another document across the desk, a sealed court record from 26 years ago. Commonwealth vs. Marcus Berkman. Charge, conspiracy, racketeering, murder for hire. Status, sealed by federal order. My father made a lot of enemies, Donald said. Before I was born, he was involved in things that should have gotten him killed. Instead, he made a deal. Testified against his former partners. Entered witness protection with my mother. His jaw tightened. But he left someone behind. A daughter from a previous relationship. A daughter who was hidden, protected, kept off every record that could tie her back to him. I sank into the chair, my legs no longer able to hold me. And that daughter is Eli's mother. Was. Donald's voice cracked, just slightly. She died 6 months ago, before Eli was born. Then how? Surrogacy. He pulled up a file on his laptop, turned it so I could see. Medical records, contracts, all heavily redacted. Your sister agreed to carry the child. I don't know why, I don't know how they arranged it, but the paperwork is there, buried under layers of legal protections and sealed agreements. My hands shook. Why would she agree to that? I don't know, but whatever reason she had, she died protecting it. The room felt too small suddenly, too airless. The car accident, I whispered. Donald's expression went cold. Wasn't an accident. No, 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 no. Someone knew, he continued, his voice deadly quiet. Someone found out about Eli, about his bloodline, about the connection to my father's old criminal network. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. The people my father testified against? They went to prison, but their families didn't. Their organizations didn't. And they've been waiting 26 years for leverage. I couldn't breathe. Eli is that leverage. Donald turned to face me, and I saw it then. The war he was preparing for. Your sister knew. That's why she hid the truth. Why she sealed the records. Why she made you promise to protect him. His voice dropped. Because she knew if the wrong people found out what he was, who he was connected to, they'd either kill him to punish my father's memory, or take him to control me. Then we bury this, I said desperately. We destroy the DNA results. We tell the judge there was a mistake. It's too late. Donald's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. They already know. He showed me the message. Unknown number. 5 words that made my blood run cold. We know about the baby. Hit that like button right now if you just realized this adoption story turned into something way more dangerous. Because what happens in the next 5 minutes? Hazel's about to find out exactly how far people will go to get what they want. Donald's voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the steel underneath. Pack a bag, Hazel. You and Eli are moving into a secure location tonight. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. He stepped closer, and I hated how his presence made the fear feel just slightly less suffocating. Because in about 6 hours, people who should never know Eli exists are going to start making moves, and when they do, I need you somewhere I can protect you. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only one who can keep him alive. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. I answered without thinking. A voice I didn't recognize, distorted, mechanical. "Give us the child, Ms. Berkman, or learn what your sister learned about saying no." The line went dead. Donald was already moving, grabbing his jacket, his phone pressed to his ear. "Dimitri, I need a full security team at Hazel Berkman's apartment in 15 minutes. Yes, now." He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something that looked like fear. "They're already moving, Hazel, and they won't stop until they have him." The security team arrived at my apartment before I did. 3 men in dark suits moving through my small one-bedroom like they were clearing a war zone, checking windows, sweeping for devices, installing cameras I hadn't asked for. Dimitri, Donald's head of security, was a mountain of a man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Pack light," he said when I walked through the door. "Clothes for 3 days, essentials only." I didn't agree to this. "Mr. Berkman doesn't need your agreement. He needs you alive." I wanted to argue, wanted to throw them all out and pretend the last hour hadn't happened. But my phone was still warm from that call. "Give us the child, or learn what your sister learned." So I packed. The safe house was in Lincoln Park. Elegant brownstone, quiet street, the kind of neighborhood where no one asked questions because everyone had secrets worth protecting. Donald was already there when we arrived, standing in the living room with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, clipped tones. He ended the call when he saw me. "Second floor. Master bedroom on the right. Nursery's across the hall." "You set up a nursery?" 2 hours ago." Of course he did. I carried Eli upstairs, my exhaustion finally catching up with me. The nursery was perfect. Soft gray walls, white crib, blackout curtains. Everything a baby could need. Everything except safety. The threats started small. The next morning I received an email from Dr. Morrison. "Hazel, the board has received several complaints regarding your recent absences and your distracted behavior with patients. We need to discuss your continued employment. Please schedule a meeting with HR immediately." My hands shook as I read it. I hadn't been distracted, hadn't missed appointments. My patient notes were flawless. Someone was lying, and the board was listening. An hour later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Ms. Berkman?" A woman's voice, professional, cold. "This is Linda Torres from the Department of Children and Family Services. We've received a report of concern regarding a minor in your care." My blood went cold. "What kind of concern?" "The complaint alleges neglect, unsafe living conditions, substance abuse." "That's insane. I'm sure it is, Ms. Berkman. But we're required to investigate all reports. I'll need to schedule a home visit within 48 hours. She hung up before I could argue. I stood in the middle of the safe house, staring at my phone, understanding with brutal clarity what was happening. They were dismantling my life piece by piece. Job, credibility, custody. Everything I'd built to prove I could take care of Eli. Donald found me in the nursery an hour later, sitting in the rocking chair with Eli asleep in my arms. "They're targeting my job," I said without looking up. "Anonymous complaints to the board. DCFS visit scheduled. Someone's building a case that I'm unfit." "I know." "You know?" "My team flagged the DCFS complaint 30 minutes after it was filed." He leaned against the doorframe, his expression grim. "It originated from a burner phone. The IP address traces back to a cafe in Cicero, known territory for the Bellini family." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Donald said it, like a curse, told me everything I needed to know. "Who are they?" "Rival organization. They controlled the South Side before my father's testimony destroyed their operations 26 years ago. They've been rebuilding ever since." He stepped into the room, his voice dropping. "And now they know about Eli. Know he's connected to my bloodline. They see him as either revenge or leverage, possibly both." So what do we do? We prepare. His jaw tightened. I've assigned a security detail. 2 men, rotating shifts. They'll be outside whenever you leave this house. I didn't ask for... I don't care what you asked for. His voice went hard. You're not dying because you're too stubborn to accept help. We stared at each other across the nursery, tension crackling between us. I wanted to tell him to leave, to take his security team and his arrogance and get out of my life, but my sister's voice echoed in my memory. Promise me you won't let anyone take him. Fine, I said finally, but I want rules. Your men don't come inside. They don't interfere with my routine, and they don't make decisions about Eli without consulting me first. Something flickered in Donald's eyes. Respect, maybe. Agreed. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, Patricia called. Her voice was tight, professional. Wrong. Hazel, I need you to come to the courthouse. Immediately. What happened? An emergency custody petition was filed last night. Someone's claiming they have a superior right to Eli. My stomach dropped. Who? I don't know yet. The paperwork just came through, but Hazel, she paused. It's been fast-tracked. The hearing is in 3 hours. I hung up and turned to find Donald already in the doorway, his phone in his hand, his expression murderous. Who filed it? I asked, my voice shaking. He showed me his screen, a legal document, emergency petition for custody. The petitioner's name at the bottom made my blood run cold. Adriana Berkman, aunt of the deceased, Marcus Berkman. Biological great-aunt of Eli James Berkman. She's claiming family rights, Donald said, his voice flat. Arguing that you're an unfit guardian due to the ongoing investigation, your unstable employment, and your connection to... He stopped. To you, I finished. Yes. I looked down at Eli, sleeping peacefully in my arms, oblivious to the war being fought over him. This is coordinated, I whispered. The complaints, the DCFS visit, now this. Someone's orchestrating it. The Bellinis! Donald's voice was ice. They're using Adriana as a front. If she gets custody, she'll hand him over within a week. Then we fight back. We will. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my attorney. We'll be ready. But even as he said it, I could see the truth in his eyes. We were playing defense. And in this game, defense meant losing slowly. Someone wanted Eli, and they were willing to destroy everything I had to get him. The question wasn't if they'd come for him, it was when, and whether I'd still be standing when they did. The emergency custody hearing notice arrived by courier at 6:47 a.m. I was feeding Eli in Donald's guest room, the one with bulletproof windows and a panic button disguised as a light switch, when the knock came. Donald answered the door, scanned the document, and his jaw went tight. They're moving faster than I expected. I looked up from Eli's bottle. Who's moving? He handed me the paper. Emergency petition for temporary custody, filed by Child Protective Services, Cook County Grounds. Immediate safety concerns, unstable living environment, credible threats against minor child hearing. Date, today, 2:00 p.m. My hands shook. They can't just... This is insane. I'm in protective custody because of the threats. That's the opposite of unstable. It doesn't matter. Donald was already on his phone. Someone filed a complaint. Anonymous tip, probably. Claiming you're unfit, that Eli's in danger because of your connection to me. But that's exactly backward. I know. He turned away, his voice dropping into that cold, controlled register that meant he was planning something. Victoria, I need you at the courthouse in 6 hours. Emergency custody challenge. Yes, they're using CPS as a weapon. He listened for a moment. I don't care what it costs. File a counter motion. Hazel Berkman is a licensed clinical psychologist with a spotless record. The only threat to that child is the people trying to take him." He hung up and looked at me. "Get dressed. We're going to court." The courthouse felt different this time. Hostile. Judge Lopez's chambers were packed. Patricia from CPS, 2 attorneys I'd never seen before, a social worker with a clipboard who wouldn't meet my eyes, and Donald, standing behind my chair like a guard dog barely restrained. Judge Lopez entered looking older than I'd ever seen him. Exhausted. Cornered. "This is highly irregular," he began, settling into his chair. "Emergency hearings require substantial evidence of immediate danger. Ms. Berkman has been cooperative throughout this process. Her home study was exemplary." "Your Honor," one of the new attorneys interrupted, a man in his 50s with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "New evidence has come to light regarding Ms. Berkman's current living situation." He slid a folder across the desk. Photographs. Of me entering Donald's building. Time-stamped. Dated. Of Eli in the car, being transferred by security personnel I didn't recognize. Of Donald's penthouse, circled in red marker. Ms. Berkman is currently residing with Donald Berkman, a known associate of organized criminal networks. She has removed the child from her registered address without notifying this court or Child Protective Services. She is, by definition, in hiding. My voice came out strangled. "I'm in protective custody because someone threatened us." "Alleged threats," the attorney said smoothly, "which conveniently can't be verified because the phone number was untraceable." I stared at him. "You think I made that up? I think you're involved with a dangerous man, and that child is caught in the middle." "Enough." Donald's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stepped forward, placed both hands on the judge's desk, and leaned in. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You want to talk about danger? Let's talk about the real threat." His eyes locked on the attorney. 26 years ago, my father testified against the Volkov crime family. 3 men went to prison. 2 died there. 1 got out last month." The attorney's smug expression faltered. "His name is Alexei Volkov," Donald continued, his voice deadly quiet. "And the only reason he hasn't put a bullet in my head already is because he wants something more valuable than revenge." He pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo, and turned it so the judge could see. A grainy surveillance image. A man in his 60s, hard face, cold eyes, standing outside my old apartment building, time-stamped 2 days ago. Judge Lopez went pale. "That child," Donald said, his finger tapping Eli's carrier where he slept at my feet, "is the only living blood connection to the man who destroyed Volkov's empire. He doesn't want custody. He wants proof. Proof that my father's bloodline still exists. Proof he can use to restart a war that was buried decades ago." He straightened, his voice dropping to something that made my pulse hammer. "And every second Eli is in the system, visible, documented, tracked, he's a target." The room was silent. Finally, the CPS attorney spoke, his voice uncertain now. "Your Honor, we can't make legal decisions based on unverified criminal allegations." "It's not an allegation." Judge Lopez's voice was rough. He was staring at the photo on Donald's phone like he was seeing a ghost. "I know that face." He looked up at Donald. "I was the junior prosecutor on your father's case. I know exactly who Alexei Volkov is." The other attorney started to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "This hearing is suspended pending a closed review of the evidence Mr. Berkman has provided. In the meantime," he looked at me, something like pity in his eyes. "Ms. Berkman, I'm extending the temporary co-guardianship arrangement. You and Mr. Berkman will maintain joint custody. No changes to living arrangements without court approval." Relief crashed through me, but it was short-lived. "However," the judge continued, "if I find any evidence that this child is being used as leverage in a criminal matter by anyone, I will place him in state protective custody immediately. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, I whispered. We left through the back entrance. Donald's security team flanked us like a military escort. I was buckling Eli into his car seat when Donald's phone rang. His expression went cold as he answered, listened, hung up. What? I asked. He looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in those dark eyes. Fear. Someone leaked your location, your old apartment address, your work, your parents' house in Michigan. My blood turned to ice. How? I don't know. But it's all over the networks now. Every crew in Chicago knows where to find you. He pulled open the car door. We're not going back to the penthouse. It's compromised. Then where? Somewhere they won't think to look. The car pulled away from the courthouse, and as we drove into the gray Chicago afternoon, I pulled out my phone and started documenting every threat, every hearing, every piece of evidence. If they wanted to use the system against me, I'd learn to use it right back. I wasn't just Eli's mother anymore. I was a strategist, and I was done playing defense. Comment below if you've ever had to fight a system that felt rigged against you. Because Hazel's about to do something no one expects, and the people hunting her? They're about to learn what happens when you back a mother into a corner. The safe house was a brownstone in Lincoln Park that looked like every other renovated historic building on the block. Which, I was learning, was exactly the point. 3 exits, Donald said as we entered, his security team sweeping the rooms ahead of us. Reinforced doors, surveillance on every approach. The neighbors think this belongs to a tech executive who travels constantly. And who does it really belong to? I asked, shifting Eli's weight on my hip. Me. He locked the door behind us, engaged 3 separate deadbolts. Through a shell company that can't be traced back to my name. The interior was surprisingly warm. Hardwood floors, soft lighting, furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. A nursery already set up on the 2nd floor with everything Eli could possibly need. When did you do this? I asked. 2 days ago, after the first threat. He moved past me into the kitchen, already making coffee like he'd done this 100 times. I own 4 properties like this across the city. Fully stocked, always ready. I stared at him. You live like this all the time? Always prepared to disappear? I live like someone who learned early that safety is an illusion you pay for in advance. He poured 2 cups, slid one across the counter to me. You're going to have questions, rules you want established, boundaries. His dark eyes met mine. So ask. I took a breath, organizing my thoughts the way I did before difficult therapy sessions. Clinical, strategic, detached. I want a written schedule. Every location we move to. Every security person who has access to Eli. Every decision that affects his routine, documented and signed. Done. I want to maintain my work schedule as much as possible. My patients depend on me, and if I disappear without explanation, it raises questions. I'll arrange secure transport to and from your clinic, rotating drivers, different routes every day. I want access to all the information you have about these threats. No more surprises, no more finding out after the fact that someone's been watching my apartment or that a crime lord got released from prison. Donald set down his coffee cup slowly. That one's harder. Why? Because the more you know, the more you become a liability. If they take you, if they question you. He stopped himself. Ignorance is protection. Hazel. Ignorance is what got my sister killed. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She was kept in the dark about Eli's bloodline. She didn't know what she was protecting him from, and now she's dead. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. You're right, he said quietly. Dmitri will brief you tonight. Everything we know about Volkov, his network, his movements. you'll have the same information I have. I nodded, feeling something tight in my chest loosen slightly. One more thing, I said. If this arrangement doesn't work, if I decide I need to leave, take Eli somewhere else, you don't stop me. I'll stop you if it's not safe. Then you convince me it's not safe. With evidence, not with commands. I held his gaze. I'm not someone you control, Donald. I'm someone you work with. There's a difference. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then the corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. You know what I see when I look at you? What? Someone who should have been running organizations, not fixing other people's problems in a clinic basement. He finished his coffee and set the cup in the sink. You're wasted on therapy, Hazel. You should be dismantling empires. That night, Dimitri arrived with a laptop and 3 file folders. He spread them across the dining room table while Donald paced by the window, and I tried to absorb information that sounded like it belonged in a crime thriller, not my real life. Alexei Volkov, age 63. Released from federal prison 4 weeks ago after serving 26 years for racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder. Dimitri's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. He's been rebuilding his network, quietly, carefully. He pulled up a surveillance photo, the same man from Donald's phone. Hard face, cold eyes. He knows about Eli? I asked. He knows a Berkman bloodline child exists, but he doesn't have confirmation. The sealed records protected you, temporarily. Until the DNA test. Until the court filing went into the system, Dimitri confirmed. Someone with access leaked it. We're still trying to identify who. I leaned forward, studying the documents. Something nagged at me. These threats, I said slowly. The phone call, the text messages, they all came through different numbers, right? Burner phones, untraceable. But the timing. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the message history I'd been documenting. The first threat came 6 hours after the initial custody hearing. The second came 3 hours after I moved into Donald's penthouse. The third, I paused. The third came 30 minutes after the emergency hearing today. Dimitri and Donald exchanged a glance. What are you saying? Donald asked. I'm saying someone is watching court filings in real time, not just monitoring me physically. They have access to the legal system itself. I stood, pacing now, my mind racing. The leak isn't external, it's internal. The court clerk, Dimitri said quietly. Or someone in the CPS office. Or someone with access to both. I turned to Donald. Can you get me the list of everyone who had access to my case file? Everyone who was in that courtroom today? Donald pulled out his phone. I'll have it in an hour. Make it 2 lists, I said. Everyone who was there today, and everyone who was at the first hearing 3 weeks ago. I want to see who appears on both. Dimitri smiled, actually smiled. You think like one of us. I think like someone who's tired of being 3 steps behind. I looked at Donald. If we can identify the leak, we can control what information they get, feed them false intel, make them move when and where we want them to. You want to set a trap, Donald said. I want to stop reacting and start hunting. The lists came through at midnight. I spread them across the table, highlighting names, cross-referencing positions. And there it was. One name. Both hearings. Access to court filings and CPS records. Patricia Vega, my caseworker. The woman who'd smiled through every home visit. Who'd told me everything would be fine. Who'd known exactly where I'd be. When I'd be there, and what the court was deciding before anyone else did. My hands shook as I circled her name. Found something? Donald appeared behind me, coffee in hand. I showed him. His expression went cold. I'll handle it. No. I looked up at him. We handle it. Together, and we do it smart. I pulled out my phone, typed a careful message, and hit send. Patricia, I need to talk. Something's wrong with Eli. Can you meet me at my old apartment tomorrow at noon? Please don't tell anyone. I don't know who to trust. The reply came back in seconds. Of course. I'll be there. I looked at Donald. Tomorrow, we find out who she's working for. And if she's armed, if she brings backup, then your security team better be better than theirs. Donald's smile was sharp and dangerous. They are. The apartment felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. I stood in my old living room, the one I'd abandoned 4 days ago, and watched Dimitri's team position cameras in the smoke detectors, the light fixtures, the frame of the mirror over the couch. Audio and video, Dimitri explained, his voice low. Everything she says, everyone she contacts, all recorded. Encrypted feed goes directly to Judge Lopez's secure server. Donald stood by the window watching the street below. She'll scan for surveillance. Let her. These are military grade, she won't find them. I checked my phone. 11:47 a.m. 13 minutes until Patricia arrived. My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets. You don't have to do this, Donald said, not looking at me. I can have someone else meet her. You and Eli can stay. No. My voice was steady, even though my pulse wasn't. She trusts me. If anyone else is here, she'll know it's a trap. She might know anyway. Then we find out who she's really working for when backup arrives. Donald finally turned from the window, his dark eyes searching my face. You're sure about this? I'm sure I'm tired of running. I met his gaze. And I'm sure that the only way to protect Eli is to cut off the threat at its source. A knock at the door. Right on time. I crossed to the peephole. Patricia stood in the hallway, alone, her expression concerned and professional. No visible weapon, no backup in sight. I opened the door. Hazel. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the apartment. What's going on? Your message scared me. Is Eli okay? He's fine. He's with a sitter. The lie came easily. I just needed to talk to someone I could trust. Something flickered in her expression, too quick to read. Of course. You know you can always talk to me. She settled onto the couch, pulling out her phone. Let me just silence this. Court notifications have been crazy today. Court notifications. I watched her fingers move across the screen, typing something, then deleting it. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her whole body went tense. Everything okay? I asked. Yes, just work stuff. She set the phone face down on the coffee table. So, what did you want to talk about? I sat across from her, forcing my voice to stay calm. I think someone's been leaking information about my case, about Eli. Her expression didn't change. Too controlled, too careful. What makes you think that? The timing of the threats. They always come right after court hearings, right after I move locations. I leaned forward. Someone with access to my file is feeding information to people who want to hurt us. That's a serious accusation, Hazel. I know. That's why I need your help. I held her gaze. You have access to everyone who's been involved in my case. Can you pull the records? See who's been accessing my file? Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. I can try, she said slowly. But Hazel, maybe you're being paranoid. The stress of everything. I'm not paranoid, my voice hardened. Someone tried to take Eli. Someone threatened to kill me. And someone knew exactly where I'd be before I even got there. Her phone lit up with a message preview. I saw it before she could turn it over. Location confirmed. Moving in 5. My blood went cold. Patricia saw my face change, saw me staring at her phone, and just like that, the professional mask dropped. I'm sorry, Hazel. Her voice was flat now, empty. I really am. But you shouldn't have involved him. Donald? The Berkman family destroyed everything Volkov built. 26 years in prison, his sons murdered, his empire taken. She stood, backing toward the door. All because Marcus Berkman decided his freedom was worth more than loyalty. So you're working for Volkov? I'm finishing what should have been finished decades ago. Her hand moved to her jacket. I saw the gun before she fully drew it, and I heard the door behind her explode inward before she could aim. Donald moved like violence incarnate. One hand caught her wrist, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. The other slammed her against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. "Wrong move," he said quietly. Dimitri's team flooded in. 4 men, weapons drawn, surrounding Patricia before she could even scream. I stood frozen, my heart hammering, watching everything I'd suspected become violently real. Donald's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at me. "Volkov's men just tried to enter the courthouse. They were going after Judge Lopez." My stomach dropped. "Is he?" "Federal agents arrested them 12 seconds ago." Donald's expression was grim. "We sent them everything an hour ago. Audio, video, Patricia's communications with Volkov's network. They were waiting." He looked at Patricia, still pinned against the wall. "You were never going to get Eli." "This whole thing was a sting operation." Patricia's face went white. "You can't. I have immunity. I made a deal." "With who?" Donald's voice was deadly quiet. "Volkov? He's in federal custody as of 10 minutes ago. Parole violation, conspiracy, attempted murder of a federal judge." He released her, stepped back. "Your deal just evaporated. Subscribe right now if you want to see exactly how this ends, because the final courtroom showdown, it's about to prove that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's a mother who refuses to lose." 2 hours later, I sat in Judge Lopez's chambers with evidence spread across his desk like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Recorded confessions, financial records showing payments from Volkov to Patricia, text messages coordinating surveillance, plans to take Eli the moment custody was transferred to CPS. "This is extraordinary," the judge said quietly, reviewing the files, "and deeply disturbing." He looked at Donald. "You orchestrated all of this? The leak identification, the trap, the federal coordination?" "Hazel identified the leak," Donald said. "I just provided resources." Judge Lopez turned to me, something like respect in his tired eyes. "Ms. Berkman, you've been through an ordeal no one should have to endure. But I want you to know, the custody challenge is dismissed. Volkov's network is dismantled. And as of this moment, there are no remaining legal barriers to your adoption." Relief crashed through me so hard I couldn't speak. "However," the judge continued, looking at Donald, "I need to understand something. Alexei Volkov spent 26 years planning revenge. His network was extensive. What guarantee do we have that this threat is truly over?" Donald pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. "I made a deal with the federal prosecutor handling Volkov's case." I leaned forward, scanning the paperwork. My breath caught. "You gave them territory," I whispered. "Your shipping contracts, your logistics network, everything Volkov wanted, you're handing it to the government." "Not to the government," Donald corrected. "To a federal oversight program that will dismantle it piece by piece and distribute the assets to legitimate businesses." He looked at me, and I saw the weight of what he'd sacrificed in those dark eyes. "Volkov wanted proof that Berkman blood still had power, proof he could use to rebuild." Donald's voice was quiet, but absolute. "I'm giving him proof that we're willing to burn our own empire to protect one child." Judge Lopez stared at him. "You're destroying your father's legacy." I'm protecting my nephew. Donald stood. My father's legacy got people killed. This ends with me. The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen. The final custody hearing is scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. He looked at me. Bring Eli. And Ms. Berkman? Yes? Congratulations. You're about to become a mother. Monday morning arrived with winter sun breaking through Chicago's gray clouds. I stood outside Judge Lopez's chambers with Eli in my arms, wearing the one professional dress I owned that still fit, and tried to remember how to breathe. Donald stood beside me, silent, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Ready? He asked. I looked down at Eli, 3 months old, sleeping peacefully despite the moment that would define the rest of his life. I've been ready since the night my sister died. The courtroom was different this time. Emptier. Just Judge Lopez, a court reporter, Victoria Shaw representing me, and a federal prosecutor named Elizabeth Grant who'd flown in specifically for this hearing. No Patricia, no hostile attorneys, no emergency motions. Just the truth, finally allowed to speak. Judge Lopez settled into his chair, reading glasses perched on his nose, and opened the file that had consumed the last month of my life. This case, he began, his voice heavy with something that sounded like exhaustion mixed with relief, has been one of the most complex custody matters I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. He looked at me. Ms. Berkman, you've demonstrated extraordinary resilience, intelligence, and love for this child. Despite threats, legal challenges, and revelations that would have broken most people, you've remained focused on one thing: Eli's welfare. My throat tightened. The DNA evidence has been reviewed, verified, and will be sealed by court order effective immediately. He pulled out a document, signed it with a flourish. The biological origins of this child are now permanently protected information. No future inquiry, no matter the source, can access these records without a federal court order. Elizabeth Grant stood. Your Honor, the United States Attorney's Office has completed its investigation into the conspiracy against Ms. Berkman and the child. Alexei Volkov and 7 associates are currently in federal custody. Patricia Vega has agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. And the threat to this child? The judge asked. Neutralized. The network that sought to exploit his bloodline has been dismantled. Judge Lopez nodded slowly, then turned to Donald. Mr. Berkman, I understand you wish to make a statement. Donald stood, and the room seemed to shrink around his presence. I do, Your Honor. He moved to the witness stand, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The court reporter's fingers poised over her keyboard. My name is Donald Marcus Berkman, he began, his voice steady, formal. I am the nephew of Marcus Berkman, whose testimony 26 years ago led to the conviction of Alexei Volkov and the dismantling of a criminal organization responsible for at least 14 murders. Judge Lopez leaned forward. My father had a daughter I never knew existed. A daughter who was hidden, protected, kept away from the violence that defined our family. Donald's jaw tightened. That daughter gave birth to Eli 6 months ago, then died under circumstances that are still under federal investigation. He looked at me, and something in his expression made my chest ache. Hazel Berkman's sister agreed to carry this child, to protect him, to give him a chance at a life that wasn't defined by bloodlines and violence and the sins of men long dead. His voice dropped. She died for that choice, and Hazel has been fighting to honor it ever since. Mr. Berkman, the judge said carefully, are you claiming parental rights to this child? No, Your Honor. The answer was immediate, absolute. I'm claiming responsibility for the danger my family's history has brought to Eli's life, for the threats that have targeted him simply because of whose blood runs in his veins. He straightened, shoulders back, facing the judge fully. I'm also claiming accountability. I've liquidated significant assets, surrendered business holdings, and cooperated fully with federal authorities to ensure this child's safety. I'm not asking for custody. I'm asking this court to recognize that Hazel Berkman is the only person who has consistently put Eli's welfare above everything else. He stepped down from the stand, returned to his seat beside me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw his hands shake slightly before he clasped them together. Judge Lopez was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his gavel. "Ms. Berkman, please stand." I stood, shifting Eli's weight, my heart hammering so hard I could barely hear. "After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and circumstances of this case, I am granting your petition for adoption." His voice was firm, final. "Effective immediately. You are Eli James Berkman's legal guardian with all rights and responsibilities of parenthood." The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the small courtroom like a door closing on the past and opening on something new. "Congratulations," Judge Lopez said, and he was smiling now, genuinely. "You've earned this." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Just held Eli tighter and felt 3 months of terror finally release its grip on my chest. Victoria approached with paperwork, official documents, adoption decree, amended birth certificate listing me as Eli's mother. I signed with shaking hands, made it real, made it permanent. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun felt warmer than it had any right to. Donald walked beside me, silent, his security team maintaining a discreet distance. "Thank you," I said finally, "for everything you sacrificed." I didn't sacrifice anything that mattered. He looked at Eli, still sleeping peacefully in my arms. "Empire is just money and power. Family is everything else." We reached the car. Donald opened the door for me, then paused. "You're going to be an extraordinary mother, Hazel." "I'm going to try." "You already have." He smiled, small, genuine, the first real smile I'd ever seen from him. "And for what it's worth, if you ever need anything, resources, protection, someone to help you move furniture, I'm one phone call away." I settled Eli into his car seat, then turned back. "Donald?" "Yeah? Why did you really do all of this? The resources, the protection, the sacrifice?" I held his gaze. "You could have walked away. Let the system handle it. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment, something complicated moving behind those dark eyes. "Because your sister gave Eli a chance at a normal life," he said finally, "and I owed it to my father's memory, no matter how complicated our relationship was, to make sure his grandson got to live it." He stepped back. "Take care of him, Hazel." "I will." I climbed into the car, and as we pulled away from the courthouse, I looked back. Donald stood on the steps, watching us leave, his hands in his pockets, looking somehow smaller without the threat looming over us, but also more human, more real. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text. "Thank you for seeing me as more than just someone who needed saving." His response came 30 seconds later. "Thank you for reminding me that some things are worth burning empires to protect." That evening, I sat in my apartment, my real apartment, the one I could finally return to, with Eli asleep in the nursery I'd set up 3 months ago. The adoption decree sat on my coffee table, official and permanent and real. I picked up my phone, scrolled to my sister's contact, the one I hadn't been able to delete, and I typed a message I knew she'd never read. I kept my promise. He's safe. He's loved. And he's mine. Thank you for trusting me with him. I won't let you down. I hit send even though the message would never deliver, and for the first time since the night she died, I felt like I could finally breathe. 3 weeks after the adoption was finalized, life began to feel almost normal. Almost. I returned to work at the clinic, my patients welcoming me back with the kind of quiet relief that came from people who'd been managing their trauma alone for too long. Dr. Morrison didn't apologize for the way she'd handled my absence, but she did offer me a promotion, senior clinical director, my own office, autonomy over my schedule. I turned it down, not out of spite, but because I'd learned something important in the last month. I didn't need validation from people who only valued me when I made their lives easier. I needed to value myself. So I started my own practice. Small, private, selective. Patients who needed real help, not parents looking for someone to rubber stamp their children's failures. And it turned out, when you stopped trying to please everyone, the right people found you anyway. Donald called every few days, not to check on me. He respected boundaries too much for that. But to update me on the quiet dismantling of threats I'd never see coming. Volkov's trial starts next month, he said during one call, his voice as controlled as ever. Federal racketeering, conspiracy, attempted murder. He's looking at life without parole. And his network? Gone. The people who worked for him are either in custody or smart enough to know that coming after Eli now would be suicide. I shifted Eli to my other hip, watching him grab at the phone cord with tiny, determined fingers. "You sound tired," I said. "I've been closing out business interests, liquidating assets, rebuilding something cleaner." He paused. "Turns out when you burn down an empire, there's a lot of paperwork." "Any regrets?" "Not one." A month later, Donald showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there with a gift bag and an expression that looked almost nervous. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Everything's fine, I just—" He held out the bag. "This is for Eli." Inside was a handmade blanket, soft gray wool, expertly knitted with a small embroidered design in the corner. A bear. "My mother made it," Donald said quietly. "Before she died. She used to make them for children in the family. I found it when I was packing up my father's estate." I ran my fingers over the stitching, something tight forming in my chest. "Donald, this is—" "He should have something from the family that isn't violence or secrets or buried crimes." His voice was rough. "He should have something that's just love." I looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd sacrificed everything to protect a child he barely knew, and saw the grief he'd been carrying alone. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, already turning to leave. "Donald?" He stopped. "Do you want to meet him? Properly, I mean. Not in a courthouse or a crisis. Just as family." Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "I'd like that." We sat in my living room while Eli practiced tummy time on a blanket, the one Donald's mother had made. Donald watched him with an expression I'd never seen before, soft, unguarded. "He has my father's eyes," he said quietly. "Dark, serious." "He laughs when you make faces at him," I offered. "Very unserious." Donald demonstrated, pulling an exaggerated expression that made Eli giggle. A sound so pure it felt like it could rewrite history. "You're good at this," I said. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "I spent my whole life learning how to control situations, manage threats, stay 3 steps ahead. But this?" He gestured at Eli. "There's no strategy for loving someone this much." "Sure there is," I said. "You show up, you stay. You don't leave when it's hard." He looked at me, and I saw the question he wouldn't ask. "You're welcome here any time," I said. "Not as the man who saved us, just as Uncle Donald." His smile was small but real. Uncle Donald. I liked that. 6 months after the adoption, I took Eli to the cemetery where my sister was buried. It was a quiet morning, early spring. The kind of day where winter finally released its grip and let something new grow. I sat on the grass beside her headstone with Eli in my lap, now 8 months old, babbling at birds and grabbing at grass with sticky fingers. "He's perfect," I said aloud, my voice steady. "Smart, happy, loved." The wind moved through the trees. "You chose me for this, and I need you to know. I get it now. Why you kept the secret. Why you carried him even though it put you in danger." I adjusted Eli's sun hat. "You wanted him to have a chance. A real life. Not one defined by other people's choices." A pause. "I'm giving him that. I promise." Eli reached for a dandelion, squealing with delight. And I felt, for the first time, like my sister could finally rest. That evening, I stood in Eli's nursery, watching him sleep, and thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago. Exhausted, invisible, fighting to keep everything together while people questioned whether I was enough. I wasn't that woman anymore. I'd learned to read threats like sentences, to set traps like strategy, to negotiate with men who thought power came from violence, and prove them wrong. I'd learned that survival wasn't about being the strongest person in the room. It was about being the smartest and the most stubborn. My phone buzzed. A text from Donald. "Eli's 6-month checkup went well?" I smiled, typing back. "Perfect. Doctor said he's ahead on milestones. Probably gets it from his genius mother. Definitely not from the Berkman side. We're all socially stunted." Says the man who just donated $3 million to children's hospitals. Anonymously. Don't ruin my reputation. I set down my phone and looked at Eli one more time. This child who'd almost cost me everything. This child who'd given me everything instead. I'd crossed into a world I didn't fully understand, one of secrets and power and violence that lived just beneath Chicago's polished surface. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore, because I'd learned something Donald had known all along. Power doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing in a courtroom, refusing to back down. Sometimes it looks like a mother who documents every threat, identifies every leak, and turns the system against the people trying to weaponize it. Sometimes it looks like someone who will burn the whole world down before she lets anyone take what's hers. I pulled the gray blanket, the one Donald's mother had made, over Eli's sleeping form. And I whispered the promise I'd made that first night in the courthouse, the promise I'd keep for the rest of my life. No one will ever take you from me. Not the courts, not criminals, not anyone. You're mine. And I never let go. If this story reminded you that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous, subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell because I've got more stories about hidden power, impossible choices, and people who protect what they love without asking for permission. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest, the DNA reveal, the trap, or the final sacrifice. Because your voice matters, and these stories exist because you're here. Thank you for being part of this family. Until the next story, take care of yourself.